Hey Eric, so the title of today's podcast is Back to the Future. Do you remember that 80s iconic movie?
I sure do. So like, what was his name? Marty McFly and Doc, and he like accidentally they screw up something and they end up going into the past, and then he interrupts interactions with his parents and he has to try to fix all that. Is that
Yeah, that's the
right?
iconic movie. It's exactly the movie I'm talking about. And there's some kind of truth to how our minds kind of work in reality.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good. Well, more on that in a moment. But first,
Hello, I'm Steve.
and I'm Eric, and together we are two dads with one mission.
Welcome to the 𝗙𝗃𝗱𝗀 podcast. This is the show for dads, all about fatherhood, faith, and freedom, one conversation at a time. Yeah, so as I was saying, Eric, there's some truth to that in terms of, in the movie, Marty uses this DeLorean time machine to, I think the car's got to get up to 88 miles an hour. 88 miles an hour, and it shoots them in time. Obviously, in the first movie, it was into the past, but there's some truth to that in terms of the way that we operate. It's almost like our mind is our own DeLorean. We've got like this DeLorean time machine, which is our mind, because physically, and again, I invite our listeners to consider this as you and I are speaking, or if you're watching the YouTube version of the podcast, as you're watching us right now, we're physically in now. Our bodies are in now.
Yep.
And when we think about something that happened to us in the past, it's almost like our DeLorean time machine transports us back to the past, remembers what happened, that event, and almost like brings it back to consciousness. Sure. And all of our experiences and our emotions and our feelings that we had back then, it transports them back to now,
right up to the present.
Back to the future, and we feel and experience the same emotions that we felt back then. And when I say back then, that could have been a couple of hours ago, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago, a couple of years ago, a couple of decades ago. It matters not that the time. It could have been months or decades. It feels so real in the now because our DeLorean kind of inbuilt time machine.
Yeah, it can affect our physiology. Have you ever had a thought about something and then all of a sudden your heart's beating fast, or you're feeling anxious about it? I mean, it's as real as it gets.
It is. And there's that famous Henry Ford quote, isn't there? The quote which goes, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right.
Right.
And what that means is, look, the mind so vividly imagines things that can be physically real, or imagine things that seem to be real.
Yeah.
The mind can't tell the difference between what's real and and what's real. Sorry, what's fantasy and what's reality.
Yeah. If somebody with authority or somebody with influence over you has told you that you are XYZ, not capable of something, or the opposite, somebody that really believes in you and says, I know you can do it, you've got the skills, those two things can motivate you to take action and move forward, or sit still and do nothing. Just based upon those experiences. And when we reach back and grab onto those things, for good or bad, it'll do something to us.
Yeah, so in the movie as well. So in the movie, obviously, the first movie, Marty goes to the past. And the second movie, he goes to the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so Back to the Future Part 2, he actually goes to the future because, there's stuff that's gone down in the future that, Doc comes and grabs Marty at the beginning of the Back to the Future 2 to say, hey, we've got to go back to the future to fix stuff. Something's happening there. And it's like the inbuilt DeLorean that we've got, our inbuilt time machine, can transport us from the past and to the future. So how does it transport us into the future? One word, it's called anxiety. So when we're anxious about something, anxiety is a fear of something that has yet to happen. It's usually we get anxious about something that's coming up in our lives, something that may be happening tomorrow, this afternoon, in a week's time, a month's time, and we get anxious by thinking about something that hasn't happened yet. And again, our DeLorean, our inbuilt time machine, transports us to the future. And normally when we're anxious, it's a negative feeling. And what our mind does is it creates all of these wonderful movies in our mind about all the things that could go wrong in the future, about that event we're thinking about, which makes us feel bad. It gets all of these negative emotions churning in our nervous system. And then it brings all of that back to now, so that now as I sit here thinking about something that might not be happening for weeks, I can feel bad about that now. I get anxious about it. Just thinking about it, I'm getting anxious. And that, again, is that inbuilt time machine, you know, within us.
Hey, I wasn't really planning on talking about this, but, you know, it's just coming up in my mind. And so just to have a moment of transparency, I'll spare the you know, the personal details. But, you know, 5 years ago, I went to court and started this whole divorce and custody thing. And, you know, on a lot of levels, it was a traumatic experience. I've never been through anything like that. And now I am getting ready to go back to court because of some actions that my ex-wife has taken. And, you know, initially I was dragging all that stuff from the past up and like trying to process it. But what I've done, and maybe this is a takeaway for this episode, is that I'm a really different person now. And I've learned a lot from my past experience with court and really taking the time to educate myself. And so I'm bringing that confidence. So every time those really negative and kind of anxious kind of thoughts come into my mind, I just kind of filter them through my experience and my wisdom that I've gained. And it just really kind of squashes them, you know, and it allows me to live in the now and not be hampered by those things in the past. So just to kind of maybe a personal testimony of how we just don't have to live in the past. We can really look forward to the future in a more positive way by just controlling what we allow or how we process what comes into our mind. You know, you can't really stop what comes into your mind, but you can control what you do with it once it's there.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really valid point, and I think it begs repeating or maybe even expanding upon, which I'm going to attempt to do now, Eric. So, you know, what you said a moment ago, I think is real value. So listen up, folks. Real value here is, look, you can't prevent something that's already happened in the past. It's happened. Yeah. You know, what's in the past has passed. You know, that is the bottom line. But let's just say, for example, you know, as I'm sitting here now and you're listening to me, you know, I'm 51 years old. So the 51-year-old Stevie sat here now. Let's just say I had something in my past that came up when I was 41. Let's pick a round number. So 10 years ago. And it gave me real trouble 10 years ago. And then when I think about that, something in my environment comes up over the next day or so that reminds me of something that happened 10 years ago. And it brings all that back up for me, and it comes bubbling to the surface. And I think about that again, and it caused me real trouble at the time. So I start to bring all that back using my DeLorean inbuilt time machine into me now and feel how I felt back then. But here's the thing. Back then I was 41. I'm now 10 years older. So in 10 years, I've read more books, you know, I've had more conversations, I've had more expanded, you know, insights and knowledge and experience, just 10 extra years of life experience.
Sure. The experience is a big one, like especially in my scenario, you know, just, you know, back then that was my first time doing it. Now it's not my first time. And I know enough about it that I can, like, okay, I set all that aside and I can deal with what's most relevant now and not have to worry about everything else.
Yeah. And all of that knowledge of the world that you brought with me. So when I think about that thing in the past that I brought back to now with my inbuilt time machine, maybe with those 10 extra years of real world experience, I could see it through a different set of eyes and maybe put it into perspective. Maybe see it differently to how it was.
Absolutely.
Because maybe back then I didn't have the necessary resources and knowledge and insights to be able to maybe solve that problem, but today I do. So now when I think about it, it can have a slightly different meaning to what it had before.
Yeah. And it causes you to react in a potentially more positive way.
Yeah. And likewise, we can do the same for the future. So, potentially there's something that I'm a little anxious about. And normally, even if this is at an unconscious level, and you're thinking, well, I'm just anxious and I don't know why I'm anxious. I guarantee if you were to slow that down and you were to do some sort of a therapy or an intervention, it would be because you're playing a movie in your mind about how it's going to pan out, and it has a negative ending. That's how the movie ends. It'll be a negative ending.
Yeah.
But you might not be able to consciously see all of that in your mind right now. It's just like, no, I'm just anxious and I don't know why I'm anxious.
Yeah.
But again, you've got this wonderful mind that is so vivid in its experience and its richness that it can't distinguish between what's real and reality and what's fantasy.
Yeah.
So you could use that same power of your mind and that imagination and creativity to imagine that thing in the future going right, having a really positive ending.
Yeah.
And then trying that on. So now how do I feel about that thing that I've got to do tomorrow, next week, next month? And the likelihood is if you imagine it ending positively, you're probably going to feel a little less anxious about it, because your DeLorean time machine will take all of that experience, that imagining it ending positive, take that out to the future, try it on out there, notice how you feel and bring it back. But it's just
and to take it to another, another level is imagining things that you want in your life, things you don't actually have, and visualizing those things and imagining them. I'm not talking any kind of woo-woo stuff here or manifestation or whatever. I mean, there's something to that, but and I always say you get what you look for. So taking this power that we've been talking about in mostly kind of a negative light, stuff in the past and anxiousness and fears and all those kinds of things, and just completely flipping it around and saying, what do I want for my life?
Yeah.
Understand your values. Think about what you really want, write it down. What's your purpose in life, and start looking for those things. Your brain will figure that out and take you into the future that you want, instead of just letting life kind of happen and like, oh, I'm 10 years down the road and this is what's happened. So many people kind of play the victim with their life of just they're like like an observer in a way. Oh, this is who's in my life now. This is what's happening. Oh, my job laid me off. Like they're just a spectator in their life.
And Eric, that in and of itself is the golden nugget in the podcast there, in terms of, and I have a phrase which is called, look, you say it the way you want it. So many people talk about the kind of future in a negative way, in terms of they tell you what they don't want. Yeah. So, I don't want to fail.
I did that for years.
Stupid. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. So already, just think about that for a moment. When you don't want to do something, you have to imagine it going wrong. So already you're creating that movie with a negative ending in your mind.
And all the chemical stuff that's going on in the head around that.
Yeah, and it's about, and we've covered this in a previous episode.
Yeah, we have.
To some respect, and it's about saying it the way you want it. So, okay, so if you don't want that, how do you want it to be then? How do you want it to be different in a way that, it's not what you don't want. It's almost like playing the opposite game. So if that's what you don't want, what do you want instead? What's the positive?
Let's put a bow tie on this episode. We're getting close here. So think about this, and I think everybody's had this experience where you hear a song from maybe in high school or your college years or something like that, and it brings back feelings and emotions and experiences. Right? We've all experienced this. Now think about if you could imagine the life that you want, that gets your heart going, that gets your mind excited. Think about the power of that. If a stupid song can do this to us physiologically and mentally and emotionally, what can imagining the future that we really want do for us? I think it can do the same thing. Yeah. But if your future plans are simply getting a raise at your job, it's not enough to get your heart going. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be scary. If your future doesn't scare you a little bit and make you feel like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to achieve that, you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
So, okay. Any parting thoughts on all that?
No, just some amazing insights there. This it's probably one of those episodes where you want to rewind after you've listened to it, maybe listen to it again, and you'll get some duplicate insights and new ways of thinking about things. Yeah, we've covered quite a complex topic. I mean, hey, Back to the Future, how can that not be complex? There needed to be some sort of flux capacitor in there, didn't they?
Right, it did. Somebody had to say that. So in our next episode, I think it's going to be a good tie-in actually to kind of how we left this one, which we're going to start a 3-part series on confidence, convictions, and creativity. And I think all of this plays into what kind of future do you want?
Yeah, definitely. And I can't resist saying it, that's going to be a 2.1 gigawatt experience.
Oh, all right, Doc. So how do people get a hold of us?
Yeah, dead easy. Just open your favorite browser and just type in allieddads.com, and that's how you'll find our resources.
Yeah. And you can connect with us there. Hey, if you want to talk about this, we'd love to do that. If you have a suggestion for future episodes, we'd love to hear that too. So reach out to us. Okay.
Yeah. You'll find us on your favorite. Yeah, you'll find us on your favorite streaming channels. And, please do hit those subscribe and bell buttons so that you get notified when new episodes drop. New episodes every Thursday.
Perfect. All right. Hey, thanks for being here, everybody. Good to talk with you, Steve.
Yeah, see you on the next episode.
All right. Bye-bye.